Stop being a cock block. Marco, aren't you gay?
Gay? Yeah. You wish I was gay, so I'd let you put your dick in my mouth. Wow.
How to Make It in America is an American television series created by screenwriter, producer, and director Ian Edelman. The show originally ran from February 14, 2010 to November 20, 2011 on HBO. It was executive produced by Mark Wahlberg, Stephen Livingston, Rob Weiss, Julian Farino, and Jada Miranda. These were some of the same producers of HBO's other hit television series, Entourage. This led to comparisons between the two shows, with How to Make It in America being seen as an East Coast take of Entourage, since Entourage was already on its 7th season at the time of How to Make It in America's initial airing. In a 2019 Complex magazine feature titled Oral History of How to Make It in America by Julian Kimble, the show's main cast, producers, and other key contributors were interviewed on their experience and memories of their 2-season run and its continued legacy. Ian Edelman describes his idea for the show at the time as, "This is what I think is cool. This is a show that doesn't exist that I'd want to watch, and this is a world that I know firsthand and want to write about." He was set on having the show be a realistic depiction of young adults engaging with their friends and families as they strive for more in New York City. However, instead of allowing the show to drown in the superficiality and professionalism of the mainstream fashion world, he decided to give a fun yet amateur look into the downtown art scene, creating a fictional representation of this diverse subculture from the early 2010s that helped popularize modern streetwear to where it is today. With a clear sense of what he wanted the show to be, Edelman made sure to develop his characters so they felt like real people, including the complexities and frustrations that many 20-somethings feel when navigating their path towards the life they seek for themselves. Protagonist Ben Epstein is a late 20-something-year-old fashion school dropout living in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. He used to attend the Fashion Institute Technology, aka FIT, but ends up working at Barney's, a luxury department store in Manhattan, as a sales associate. His last long-term relationship with his ex-girlfriend Rachel ended a few months ago, and he's having a hard time adjusting to being single. At the beginning of the show, Ben starts off highly dissatisfied with his life and struggles to find happiness within his work. But like many millennials his age, he still needs to pay rent and can't afford to quit his day job. However, Ben's best friend Cam doesn't let Ben succumb to his pessimistic nature. Cam Calderon is not only Ben's best friend, but the show's source of relentless optimism. He lives in the Lower East Side with his Dominican grandmother and has dreams of becoming successful and moving to Los Angeles one day, despite never having left New York City. Cam is the classic immigrant New Yorker, constantly hustling as he tries to find new ways and creative schemes to make money to support himself. However, after Ben and Cam create custom skateboard decks that fail miserably, the two wind up owing Cam's cousin, Rene, a few $1,000s for the loan he lent them before going to prison. Bryan Greeberg mentions in the Complex magazine feature, "I did a screen test with Victor Rasuk. We met that day and hit it off," with Edelman adding, "There was a moment where all the producers and I felt they could have been friends. I think they met in front of us, but they had that instant ease. You could feel the history. You could imagine the history. It became so undeniable."
I never wanted to borrow money from your shady-ass cousin in the first place.
Shady or not, at least I'm still going for it. Not working for the man like you.
What are you, 12? How long are you gonna keep saying fuck the man for?
Until we are the man.
Well, I'm sorry to be the one to break it to you, but it's time you grow the fuck up, Cam.
Like you did?
Yeah.
One failing, it's a wrap. Now you're all grown up working at Barney's. Ben, I'm sorry I lied to you about that money. I just wanted us to actually do something for once. Not just watch, as happens to all our friends.
The How to Make It in America cast exuded this undeniable chemistry. This can be seen in the relationships like Ben and Cam, but also in the characters like Cam's cousin Rene, played by actor and living New York legend Luis Guzmán. Victor Rasuk was quoted saying, "I don't think many people know this, but Luis and I had known each other for years before we did the show. Luis is a Lower East Side kid, and I'm a Lower East Side kid. We just grew up in 2 different generations. When How to Make It wanted Luis, And I don't know if it was a schedule or a creativity thing. He couldn't do it at first. But I'm proud to say that I was the one who called Louise and was like, Louise, I'm doing this. It's dope. You've got to trust me. Guzmán's Rene was truly iconic and very much one of the main protagonists of the show. He lends Cam and Ben the initial loan to get their business started in the first place. Rene is an ex-con who was recently released from prison, and instead of going back, he decides to turn his life around and quit the street life. Well, he tries. Rene quickly takes ownership of the North American territory for Rasta Monster, a Jamaican energy drink. However, Rasta Monster gets him into more trouble than he should be getting into as a parolee. He attempts to toe the line, but the friends he runs with are still caught up in the life. Rene's posse includes Edgar Garcia as Eddie, Michael Imperial as Mike, and Tuffy Quaysal as Jabbar. Director and executive producer Julian Farino explained how Guzmán's real-life friends became a part of the main cast of larger characters. We went to see him in this room at the Bowery, and he was in there smoking with two of his mates he grew up with, Mike and Eddie. We were like, well, why don't you two be in it? So they became Luis's henchmen in the show. We wanted Luis to feel welcome. We loved him, and we were so grateful that he agreed to do it without much material in the pilot. Obviously, we wrote like hell for him after that, but I think he loved us for including his friends. Rachel is first presented as Ben's ex-girlfriend, but soon becomes so much more than that as the show evolves. Probably one of the most relatable characters, she is also another main protagonist in her own right. Rachel begins dating Darren, an older guy in his 30s, and she's feeling pressured into becoming this person she's not ready to be. One thing about Rachel's character that makes her so relatable is her portrayal of being a confused young adult while navigating a bunch of jobs that she isn't really fulfilled with. She also has a romantic entanglement with Kid Cudi's Domingo Dean when he starts to deliver her weed via Domingo Dean Canines and Cannabis, but this is in season 2. Domingo Dean is Kid Cudi's first major role and an incredible debut that demonstrates his natural acting talents. Producer Julian Farino mentions, in the beginning we were thinking Cudi might be Ben or Cam, so we tested him with Victor, but he was such an individual that he worked on his own. Bryan and Victor were the ones we thought went well together as the yin and yang, but we liked Cudi so much that we told him, look, we'd like to write something for you. That's how Domingo was born. Victor Rasuk explained to Complex, there was stuff that Ben and I were doing in the audition that wasn't even on paper in the pilot. We were starting to make shit up. Then we found out later when we actually got the roles that they added a lot of the shit he and I did in the audition. The whole thing where I'm knocking on the door like, time to get paid. None of that shit was in there. Dude, the chemistry between me and Bryan was probably some of the best chemistry I've had with another actor, even to this day. We literally hung out on and off camera. Even Lake, out of all actors, she was always the busiest. She always had something going on outside How to Make It in America. But when we could hang out, we would. Lake Bell reiterated, we definitely became friends. We were single in New York and all in a space where we allowed ourselves to party. Bryan Greeberg added, we started living the show. It was crazy. Cudi and I made music together. Vic and I, we'd play ball. I don't remember where we were. Maybe it was SOBs or something, but Cudi was doing a show and there was nobody there. And I just remember him saying, oh, you guys don't know me yet, but you will. Nobody was there, but you know who was? Jay-Z. It was kind of an empty bar, but Jay was at the bar, just watching Cudi. The reoccurring characters made the main character's world feel familiar to the audience, giving it a more distinct personality. David Capo Kaplan, played by Eddie K. Thomas, is Ben's old friend from high school, who is a multimillionaire hedge fund manager. Despite being a try-hard rich guy, Thomas makes Capo more human, and his character becomes more sure of himself by the end of the show. There were also characters such as Shannon Sosaman as Jinji Woo, who was supposed to play a much bigger role in the show, but they ended up switching the concept in season 1, as well as Rachel's boss, Edie Weiss, played by Martha Plimpton. There was also Skater, Wilfredo Gomez, played by Javier Nunez. Also Rachel's boyfriend, Darren Hall, played by Jason Pendergraph. How to Make It in America allowed each main character to live on their own merit and have their own lives, but created many memorable moments when they were able to meet up and interact. The plot lines for How to Make It in America are masterfully incorporated as the characters and the storylines weave in and out of the episodes. This enables a particular connectivity within the show, which builds on the already diverse environment of New York City and gives all the characters a part of that world. The show begins centered around Ben and Cam hustling to make some money to pay off the debt they owe to Rene. This is where the show creates divergence of storylines, and we still continue on the misadventures of Ben and Cam, but we are also able to hang out with Rene and his crew to see how they move around the city and what they do. We later experience this with Rachel as well, solidifying her as the final protagonist. Season 1 of the show sees Ben and Cam exploring the city as they impulsively get the idea to start a denim line after seeing a cheap roll of authentic denim for sale. They quickly call their company Crisp Denim. During Season 1, Rene tries to launch a business venture of his own with the purchase of his energy drink company Rasta Monster, so he can start his own legitimate business for himself. On the other hand, Rachel's feeling less and less invested in her perfect life with her stable adult job and successful older boyfriend. None of these characters have their lives together in the ways that they want them to be. Despite having different goals, they all have a desire to free themselves of the situations they're currently in and move into a new one they are determined to have. The main difference in the storylines are how each character goes about solving their problems. Ben and Cam start off very optimistic, yet the more they pursue their dreams, the more naive they feel as the universe starts to act against them and test their ambitions. Every time they move 2 steps forward, life pushes them back another 3. At one moment, Ben nearly gives up, but because Cam is so passionate about succeeding, he carries the metaphorical baton and takes a pair of their ill-fitting jeans they made to a Japanese fashion designer, Hiraki, who's giving amateur designers a chance to have their pieces seen by him while he's in town. They don't get a cosign on their jeans, but he's impressed by the t-shirt Ben is wearing and asks for an order of them after he finds out that Ben made it himself. This is their first order ever and suddenly inspires the duo to switch their denim line into a clothing brand, going from Crisp Denim to just Crisp. Bryan Greeberg highlighted, "I love how they spent so much time on the details of making the jeans. I like the scenes where Ben and Cam try to raise money for the denim sample, because they illustrate the 2 sides of the coin that Ben and Cam bring to the hustle. Ben was willing to sacrifice his rent, and Cam used his street smarts to get by. So when they made the shift to tees, it worked because it practically made sense for the characters. While doing so, Ben even starts to move forward by seeing Julie, as he attempts to move on from Rachel. I think as a character, Julie comes in at a perfect time to challenge Ben's desire to enter a new relationship. He claims to be done with Rachel, but he's hesitant to commit to Julie.
Are you ever gonna fall in love with me?
Girl, if he ain't in love with you now, he ain't never gonna fall in love with you. Oh shit. My bad.
And loses her abruptly. But that's in season 2 as well, which we will get to. However, while Ben is dealing with Julie, Cam is making things happen. Victor Rasuk gave his thoughts saying, "I feel like Cam was a microcosm of what the show represented. What Cam contributed in terms of what the show represented overall was the hustle generation. The generation where we're gonna get shit done and do whatever it takes to make our dreams happen." At the end of season 1, Ben and Cam lose Renee's truck with their t-shirts for Hiraki on them. Cam ends up getting their shirts back, but he's forced to set fire to the truck for a fraud insurance claim. With him now implicated in Renee's crimes, Cam was now an accomplice and could never speak about what Rene had done. I think this perfectly summarized the idea of generational trauma and how Cam has to now carry the baggage of Rene, which holds him back. Season 1 ends with Ben and Cam getting their shirts back and making it to Hiraki's on time. By the end of the season, the two are optimistic about their future and what they want to do next. On April 21st, 2010, HBO announced the renewal of the show for Season 2. Julian Farino mentioned this, saying, "In Season 2, HBO asked for more narrative of the characters progressing. For me, I would have been happy to do a show with them scraping around for 200 every week. I loved the ground level element of Season 1, I really did, but HBO was asking us to create a little more in terms of upward trajectory for them, so it became a little less loose and slack." This gave the green light for the show to be able to take a deeper dive into the characters and see them develop into fuller versions of themselves. More of the reoccurring cast were given intricate parts and storylines, as well as a bunch of new characters and some guest roles as well. A lot of these changes were credited to the season's new showrunner, Jill Soloway, with Bryan Greeberg revealing, "Jill's energy changed the show. It got a little more interesting and a little weirder, which I liked. And I think we sort of figured out our tone and what the show was." Season 2 begins with Ben and Cam in Tokyo on a business trip. The opening montage for the season is definitely one of the best scenes of the show, and a memorable part of what makes it so charming. Victor Rasuk is quoted saying, "You know what was the best part for me? When we shot in Japan. I don't think a lot of people know this, but Brian, Ian, and I didn't even shoot with the crew. Ian took a camera and we just shot it. We had one PA, but we were shooting illegally with no permits, no nothing." Bryan Greeberg adds, "We shot so much footage in Tokyo that we could fill an entire season with it, but it was all squeezed into a 90-second montage." That's actually the last How to Make It in America footage that was ever shot. Think of it as a week-long wrap-up party. Once the two arrive back in New York City, they decide to host a pop-up shop in a storeroom in Manhattan. At the same time, Rachel's coming back from traveling around the world, while Rene is trying to gain more traction with Rastamans. Season 2 is definitely a step up from Season 1 in terms of the main characters and how they evolve from their initial selves. The show's drama primarily starts when Ben and Cam walk into Nancy Frankenberg's world when they crash a brunch at her apartment, despite previously being invited to go with Lulu. Gina Gershon played Nancy Frankenberg, and Nicole LaLiberte as Lulu. The show is also very much 6 degrees of separation, with all the characters being connected to Ben and Cam in some way or another. Ben's growth is a slow burner, and he falls into the traps that are built for his archetype. Ben's a nice guy, too nice sometimes, which is a great quality to have, but without Cam by his side, Ben isn't as balanced in his thinking, and is either extremely optimistic in his choices or extremely pessimistic in them. He's indecisive and very affable, with no real middle ground for him, especially when he wants to appease everyone and be loyal to them. He's very trusting, and that's why Ben is a great character, but when he begins to trust Nancy and then later her husband Yossi, we can see how Ben's trusting and open nature allows people to take advantage of him and twist his words against him. Yossi even clearly states his intentions to Cam in one episode. However, when Cam tries to warn Ben, he's already sold on the idea of Nancy Frankenberg. He becomes infatuated with her and wants to please her without thinking of how she's taking advantage of him. This flips the script this season, and instead of Cam, who's typically the one caught messing up in some way, it becomes more of Ben's fault. Ben has to learn to trust himself and his decisions instead of letting his indecision decide his fate. He does this with Julie, he does this with Rachel, and he almost lets it happen with Crisp. But once he sees Nancy for who she really is, he realizes he doesn't know her at all, and he's been paying attention to the wrong thing. This is when Ben becomes the guy he knows he can be, instead of falling into the idea of himself that other people have for him. This is why Cam and Ben are such a good pair. Cam is curious, where Ben is naive. Ben is reliable, where Cam runs free. Without Cam, Ben fell for Nancy's trap, but without Ben, Cam spends all his time falling for Lulu. Cam wants to be taken more seriously by those around him, and show the world that he's an actual businessman. When Cam tries to flirt with Lulu, she turns him down and feels like he's not her type, so Cam realizes he has to step up his game. Thus, he decides to link up with Domingo and use the Rastamans van to do weed deliveries to make some extra money. This seems like a good idea at the time, but eventually leads Domingo to selling a weed spray, using the Rastamans label, and getting Cam in trouble with Rene. As he fights against the temptations to fall back into his old traps, Rene meets Debbie Dominguez, played by actress Andrea Navedo. Debbie is an aspiring model, part-time security guard, and full-time mom. She wants to help Rene be better and start a life with him, but he can't seem to change for his own betterment, and the relationship struggles because of it. While Cam is running around the city and attending to his rising responsibilities, he's separated from Ben's cautious attitude and ends up having a gun pointed at him and having the Rastamans weed spray stolen by Rene's new rivals, the East Flatbush Caribbean League, who are upset at his representation of their culture and its appropriation. There's also a cameo by Pusha T as a henchman for Rene's rivals. He even raps a little.
What's good, my taste?
Mask on face, Glock in hand. I was in and out of homes like the Orkin man. Make nigga kick that can. Fall victim to the Click Clack clan. My vixen, eat your face like she missed Pac-Man. My wish, her command,
Cam believes that he can do anything, but forgets that he can't do everything at once, and that he has limitations in life. While Cam is trying to figure out how to be successful outside of the limitations, Rachel is figuring out how to do it within. Rachel's return to Manhattan has left her feeling underwhelmed by her 9-to-5 job at a corporate magazine and all of its superficial culture. She tries to have fun and do new things to help her figure out her life, but whenever she begins to accept where she's at, she seems to change her mind. When Rachel starts her fling with Domingo, tension builds up between her, Ben, and Domingo once Ben finds out. Season 2 Rachel acts as a floater and sort of a slacker that avoids responsibilities wherever they arise. Throughout the season, to stray from having to make difficult decisions, she does some new things like smoke weed, do shrooms, and go on night rides through Bushwick. Soon enough, Rachel's fired from her job when she decides to go against her boss's opinion and do a magazine article on the New York Neanderthals, a rival fashion company to Crisp NYC. However, the risk eventually pays off as the Neanderthals' Tim, played by James Ranson, offers to hire Rachel to do PR for his brand. Despite the show having a bigger production during its second season, it never truly lost its essence. With Javier Nunez, who plays Wilfredo Gomez, recalling, in season 2 they added my character into it more, which was cool. One of the best scenes was probably when I burned down the Rasta Monster ramp. We got to be creative in doing that. We got to film it on the Lower East Side, and a lot of my friends were in the neighborhood, so it was a cool vibe. Season 2 ends on Ben and Cam making up once Ben decides to part ways with Yossi and Nancy. They then end the final episode with Ben and Cam deciding to move forward with the representative they turned down earlier, Andy Sussman, and have fun partying with their friends into the early morning. Eddie K. Thomas says, shooting that scene was literally just the producers partying with us, and I was actually surprised when it came together. I was like, oh, we actually got an episode of television out of that. It felt like we were just having a good time all night. It's such a sincere and optimistic finale that creates so much hope for the characters. Ian Edelman notes, everybody felt good about the show coming back. All of us, producers, cast, writers, everybody, were happy with the second season and kept saying, oh, it's going in the right direction. It's coming up. We were getting better at making the show. Unfortunately, on December 20th, 2011, exactly 1 month after the How to Make an America Season 2 finale, former HBO programming president Michael Lombardo decided to pull the plug on the show, as well as HBO's Bored to Death and Hung, to make way for programs such as Girls and Veep. Julian Farino expressed, we just caught a very bad moment. I think it was around the time when HBO was challenged by the success of Mad Men and Breaking Bad, but they were gracious enough to say maybe they were a bit hasty. Victor Rasuk agreed, saying, the show would have gone 5, 7, 8 years if we'd gotten season 3, because I think we had just gotten our rhythm in season 2. It was just starting to take off by the time season 2 was over. Since the show's ending, it has spawned a sort of cult following, especially with it now being available on HBO Max. Despite its cancellation, it has had a greater cultural impact than many of the cast members would have ever expected. Bryan Greeberg emphasizes this, noting, I've had people come up to me and tell me, I used to live in Turkey and I saw that show and it made me want to move to America. Or I've met designers who have been on Project Runway, someone who won it, and they've been like, oh my god, I got into fashion because of your show. It's just amazing how many people this show has inspired. I remember I was sitting at a New York Knicks game and ASAP Ferg was like, dude, that show was my biggest inspiration. That's crazy to me. In 2015, Kid Cudi even tweeted, How to Make It in America was the best experience I've ever had out of anything I've ever done, and I don't think it'll ever be topped. With a few tweaks, the show's characters would be able to fit into today's environment perfectly, with entrepreneurship and hustle culture becoming the new business model for the youth and young adults. Bryan Greeberg furthered this point, saying, I actually think it would work better now because I think people have caught up to it. People have told me it was ahead of its time. If you think about it, it was before Instagram. Men didn't really talk about fashion then, you know? I feel the world would be more ready for that. Victor Rasuk marked, the hustle is still real the same way it was 8 years ago. When there's talk about a possible revival, obviously I get skeptical, but I hear these reactions and I'm like, oh yeah, we can still do this revival as long as we all kind of still look the same. The majority of the main cast members have been very vocal in interviews and online about wanting to do a reboot for the show. Victor Rasuk reiterated, I think we'd all like to do some version of a comeback, even if it's a movie or a season. Listen, I tried a few years ago and it didn't work, but maybe it just wasn't the right time. When asked, Lake Bell said, I'm gunning for a reboot in some way so we can have a window into what these guys are doing now. Bryan Greeberg said, I saw them growing in that world and becoming this streetwear media conglomerate. I had a lot of ideas of what could have been. I can see them having families and still trying to keep that together. As fashion has evolved and streetwear is now a billion-dollar industry, there's so much more that could have been explored with this show. The show was more than a cultural signifier, but years ahead of its time, just missing the entrance of modern influence culture, hustle culture, and social media. It also foresaw the entrance of streetwear into luxury fashion as it is today. They even had a Pharrell feature highlighting the entrance of hip-hop into high fashion, which can be seen today as a cornerstone of our current culture. Fast fashion, designer collabs, merch drops, sneakerheads, Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and more. This show had the potential to capture the development of all this and acknowledge it in real time, but hindsight is 2020 and HBO missed the chance. However, as the world deals with the daily ongoings of a global pandemic, I think right now is the most appropriate and necessary time to revive the series. Most fashion companies were affected by the pandemic, with the industry losing billions in profit. Though as many are beginning to bounce back and see growth as lockdowns are ending throughout the world, it still has affected a lot. Seeing this rising value, HBO is now attempting to capitalize on streetwear through shows like The Hype. On a side note, if HBO did bring back the show, they could market it with a real crisp clothing line and sell some cool ass streetwear, do some fire collabs, and tie it into the episodes just like they did with The Hype. As we are in the era of nostalgia and reboots, there's no time like the present for HBO to bring back this relevant gem, so keep on tweeting at them, tagging them, letting them hear it straight from the source. If NBC can bring back the original Law & Order for its 21st season a decade after going off air, HBO can let us know what happened to motherfucking Crisp.